All right, welcome back, guys, to the Honestly Noted podcast. Woo! Yeah. Today I got some new pod people. What? In the house we got
Jordan Flaherty
and
Kenzie Butler.
Good job. That was definitely our first take. All right, guys. Today we're going to be talking about something super cool and have one of the harder conversations today about mental health. What is it? Who does it affect? What do we do about it? Guys, thank you so much for coming on, first off, and helping me navigate this type of conversation, especially in the midst of coming out of a pandemic. You know, there have been so many teenagers, so many adults, even kids struggling with mental health. So I think one of the questions I have for you guys is, how has your mental health been affected?
For me, especially like last winter, I was having a really, really hard time, and it made it very debilitating. It was hard to do anything. It was hard to find motivation. It definitely was like, it took a toll. I was doing online last winter, and so I wasn't really going out. I wasn't doing anything. And it took me a while to make the change so that I was doing something that made me feel better.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like a lot of people have kind of experienced some kind of a shift too. And I think that's kind of one of the more beautiful things that came out of COVID was the fact that people were taking the time to look inwards and just like reflect. Like, what's going on? How can I change? How can I improve? What about you, Jordan?
But I do have some sort of anxiety almost. I think it's more of social anxiety. Yeah, where I have to I don't want to worry people, and then I want to make people happy constantly. I remember when I was younger, it was way worse. I couldn't even go into a Subway without crying because I thought I was bothering the sandwich worker.
Oh.
I will say I've improved. I'm able to order my own Starbucks order now. I've gotten better.
She's like, I work at Subway now.
Blame them.
Such a pretty woman moment. Are you kidding me? That's awesome. She was like, I was afraid of the sandwich, but then I became the sandwich. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask too, was thinking about when you were a kid, how did you guys perceive mental health? Or what was your understanding at the time?
For me, so I'm the youngest. I have 2 older siblings, and my parents got divorced when I was 5. Mm-hmm. And so my older sibling had a lot more, awareness of, how detrimental that situation was. Mm-hmm. And so they also went through a lot of mental health issues. For me, I guess I just didn't get it. Nobody really explained it to me. All I knew was that they would lock themselves in their room and not want to do anything, stay in the dark kind of thing. And so I understood something was wrong, but I never understood how it felt until I experienced it. It's something that you really have to experience to really understand.
Mental illness does run in my family, and so immediate family members have depression and stuff. So I don't want to say I'm lucky, but my family has been pretty transparent about it ever since I was younger. I would see obvious signs, but then at the time as a kid I was I couldn't recognize them. But then as I grew older, I'm oh, now I know what they're talking about.
Oh, so are you saying that they had those conversations with you?
Yeah, I think some of my earliest conversations would have been as I was getting into middle school. I had something happen in my family, and so they were okay, this is probably the time to tell you about it. Mm-hmm. We have depression running in our family. You should know about this. So if you show any signs, we can help you. They made sure I knew that.
It's very different from my family. It is very, very difficult to I'm trying to advocate for myself, but she won't advocate for herself, and so it's hard for her to advocate for me.
That's rough. Yeah, I kind of relate that in some ways. I think there have been times where certain close family members in my life have struggled with depression, and it's so hard because when there's someone that you really care about and you love and they're struggling, but they're not willing to admit it or willing to seek help. I mean, it's just there's this whole barrier that's put up. And I think there comes a time where there's a limit, I can't help you because you're not helping yourself. What do you think are some causes for feeling anxiety, for feeling depressed?
I think one of the main things is anytime I see a medical professional, they're this is normal. And I'm And so I think a lot of it does associate with especially when you're a teenager, a lot of hormones. But I wouldn't say all of it is put on hormones. I definitely think it's environment, and then also I think everything is kind of involved. And I think one of the biggest things is that, especially with the pandemic, the mindset for anything just got ruined. I would say that a mindset could make or break how you go about life.
I'm sorry, do you mean your mindset?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I just mean in general, like I've seen people change their mindset and they become completely new people because they make the effort to achieve that mindset. Instead of being like, it kind of like optimism versus pessimism. Like,
Yeah.
being,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Like you're not stuck in your situation.
Yeah.
What about you, Jordan? What do you think are some possible causes? Or what do you think has been, if you're willing to share, been the root of the anxiety that you felt?
Definitely growing up, like I was surrounded by people like who were affected by mental illness, and so there were times where like, oh, I'm nervous, I'm showing signs, like I would like shut down, but people would be like, oh, I have anxiety, you can't have anxiety. That kind of conversation would happen.
Oh.
And so, like, eventually, as I grew older, they were like, oh, yeah, now you're, like, you were too young to have anxiety.
That's another thing with just, like, in the medical field, it's like, they can't diagnose you if you're under 18. Because it's like, I don't know, it's like, they're not sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wait, I thought he was like...
They can, but they won't. They usually won't. They refuse to.
They would say, like, hormones. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, like, an imbalance or something.
Like but people can still give you medication.
No, it just depends on the provider you go to. But if you go to, like, a pediatrician or, like, just a primary care provider, they're not going to diagnose you.
What about a fortune teller? Read your hand, you're like, whoa.
You look really stressed.
You're like sweating. Oh my god, really? Well, it seems like you guys have had very unique experiences. And it is interesting with something like mental health, especially because it seems like there has been, a dramatic increase in how many people have been affected negatively. Everybody's kind of just fighting their own battles. I'm wondering, you mentioned, Jordan, how you kind of dealt with some people around you. What was it, family members?
Just, like, family and friends. I had friends who would say the same thing, that, like, you're too young to, like, have anxiety, or, like, I have it. I know you would have it, and I don't think you do. Like, that kind of conversation.
That's hard. And I think, too, like, especially in the world of comparison, it's like someone's experiences can be completely different from what someone else is showing or what someone else is dealing with. How do you think people around you, whether it's friends, whether it's family, how do you think they can support someone who is struggling with anxiety, someone who is struggling with depression, and maybe doesn't know how to communicate it, but wants to get help?
Recently, I've had a really bad experience with anxiety. Like, I couldn't go to school kind of thing. I was talking to my friends about it, and they kept on telling me, they're like, well, what helped me is knowing that everybody else is going through the same thing. I'm like, that doesn't help me, and I understand that helps you, but it's not about the people for me. And so I think one of the main things is really, if you're trying to give advice to somebody, really figure out the root of their problem, because I just keep on getting told, other people are going through the same thing, you're fine. Like, you're, and I understand, like, everybody has their own issues, but it's not about the people for me, it's about the environment, and it's not helpful to me to hear that other people are going through it. I just feel worse.
They're, like, generalizing the problem and making you, like, you feel invalidated because they're like, oh, other people have the problem, so, like, I should just suck it up.
That's interesting. You're talking about how sometimes people will kind of project.
I'm glad they're sympathizing. Like, I feel awful that everybody has some experience with it, but I feel like there's different routes to it.
Different ways that they can respond to you.
Like Jordan said, social anxiety. I have no problem with social. I
Scream right now.
I excel when it comes to talking to strangers or doing a group project or whatever. But I cannot, for the life of me, bring myself into an environment that I don't want to be in. And it's a different kind of thing where it's like, it's more of agoraphobia of just like large groups of people.
Oh.
Not necessarily the people themselves. I feel like it's a lot more common for like social anxiety. People are like scared of people. I'm scared of the environment.
That's interesting. I'm hearing from both of you that it's important to separate what someone's going through and then also how they feel about you. I had a conversation with one of my friends. She was a senior last year, and I remember it was kind of during Christmas time. It was like in January. And she said, Anna, my holiday was really great. It was really fun. My boyfriend got me great gifts. I was surrounded by family. It was a beautiful winter-like Christmas. And yet something about it just felt so empty. And I felt guilty. And I felt, and then I'm not going to say who that was because privacy. But it was totally relatable in the way that I think it was a couple years ago where I kind of shut down. And so the things that you're describing where, you're afraid to go outside, it's not so much about the people, but it's just the ideas of putting yourself in new environments. And one thing that people have kind of associated with me is confidence. And, I'll go up to you. When I was younger, I used to scream all the time. Kenzie knows that. Probably screaming at her most of the time.
This is true.
Shit. But that was suddenly taken away from me, and I was no longer in control of how I felt or how I thought about myself. So I'm wondering, how did you kind of shift out of whatever you're going through? Or maybe you're still in it, And that's okay. It's a process. It is not a straight line.
One thing I noticed, I'm in leadership at our school. In our leadership class, we plan all the assemblies, and I remember the first assembly we've had since COVID. It was the saddest thing ever. No one was cheering. I remember my first assembly where, the seniors, everyone else was acting like crazy. They would cheer for, absolutely nothing. People would get hyped.
For nothing.
This assembly was so sad. No one was cheering. I remember, they would say something and, expect someone to cheer, and then, three people would clap. Just everyone's afraid to get back out there. Some of my classes are still silent. No one talks. It's really sad. I, have, semi-social anxiety. I have it to a point where, I still want to be able to, talk to people. But, if everyone's silent, I'm not going to talk. That's, where the barrier is.
And you said about, how you're navigating it. I could feel it, coming almost, my depression.
I'll feel it coming.
Freshman year-ish, a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And I tried to, and this was before COVID. And so I was, trying to get a therapist. And as soon as I got a therapist, I went to a couple sessions, and then COVID happened, and she wasn't seeing people. And it was oh. And I didn't try to reach out until beginning of 22. I did an online therapy. My therapist said, I'm gonna be out of office. I'm I just got you. I tried one more time, and she basically told me that I was fine, and was I can't really do anything for you except for, I think she suggested religion therapy or something along those lines. I'm
That's not the answer you were looking for.
I felt really, really invalidated, and so I didn't try anymore.
There's definitely a way to respond to it. It's when you share your feelings, you're not looking for an answer, not looking for a solution to the problem. You're just wanting someone to relate to it. You don't want it to be oh, I did the same thing. That's not what you want to hear. You want to be I hear you, I hear your feelings. You're totally valid. That's what you want to hear.
Exactly.
You guys both mentioned how there's a certain way that you can communicate towards people who are struggling. Very much agree with that. I think it's interesting how, Gen Z, we're known for technology use. We're always on our phones. But I think you're right. I think we become more empathetic in the way we're trying to understand how to relate to other people. And that's something that I think might be even a generational barrier, where people don't really know how to demonstrate empathy without comparing it to something they've experienced. It's really difficult to put yourself in somebody else's shoes when those shoes are big, when they're maybe greasy on the bottom, they're too wide, the laces are untied.
I do want to add to it. It's fine if you don't understand it, but it's you have to know that they're not feeling well. You don't have to be oh yeah, I relate to it. You don't have to do that. It's just treat them with respect and help them.
Or ask what you can do to help.
Yes. I remember when I was kind of going through that period. It was I had a lot of friends reaching out. They were kind of yo, Anna, what's up? Blocked. Never blocked anyone before until then. Everyone was blocked. But I felt like I had a lot of pressure on me because it was I wanted to navigate out of this difficult situation on my own. And so once I admitted that I needed help and I was willing to take the steps in order to get to a better place, I started living a better life. And I was able to communicate. And I think you're right. I think it's totally fine if you're on the outside looking in and you're trying to help a family member or a friend or, a partner, whoever. And you're I don't know how to help you, but please allow me to understand how I can be there to support you. What are some things you recommend people who are struggling with anxiety, with depression, with not even knowing what the heck is going on in this world? What are some things you recommend them doing in order to reach that place of understanding and growth?
The first thing I do is try to see where I'm starting to distance myself, like you said. I tend to distance myself from my friends when I'm getting in a worse spot. One of the first things I go about it is what are my triggers? Then trying to figure out who's really there for you and who's not, because those people who are not there for you are going to make it worse. And that's like one of the hardest things that, like, I have really bad attachment issues, and if I can't let go of a person that's harming me, it just gets worse. And that takes like a lot of like personal understanding, like knowing yourself and knowing your surroundings. And always ask somebody for help when you really need it, is somebody you trust or one of the anonymous hotlines.
For sure, yeah. And those will be provided at the end of the video and in the link in the description.
I'd say I'm someone who struggles with like asking people for help. Like, that's okay as long as you know a point where it's like, okay, I think I finally need to ask someone. I tend to overthink things, and so I have like one person in my life I know I can trust with like asking, like, am I overthinking this? Am I like, I'll be on a subject for like hours. Oh, I did something wrong. I totally like dropped a ball. I hurt someone's feelings. Oh my gosh. And then like I'll get so wrapped up, and then I have to ask someone, like, am I overthinking? And they're like, yeah, they probably don't even remember that happening now. And I'm like, you're right.
Yeah, I think what both of you guys just said, talking about, building a safe support system around you, really prioritizing and like looking at who you're surrounding yourself with, because that definitely affects your mental health. And then identifying your triggers, what sets you off. I think for me, like, I've recently been kind of dealing with some anxiety, and that was like really new for me. It was hard for me to learn that sometimes anxiety just comes out of nowhere, and so it was really helpful for me to like hear like that same idea from multiple different people, because I was like, where is this coming from? Like, I don't have a problem like talking to people, I don't have a problem doing new things or like any of that, but sometimes it just hits me and I just don't feel like I'm in control.
Like a panic attack or something along those lines long term. I definitely can relate to that.
How would you explain anxiety to someone who doesn't understand or who has never experienced it?
I get like so much adrenaline where it's like I have to do something but I can't do anything. It's like almost like a fight or flight response where I'm like, I have to get out of this situation immediately, and if I can't, it gets worse. And it's like, that's how it feels, where like you feel trapped.
For me, it's really just school. I don't know if I could say I feel trapped. I know I have the ability to not go. If I feel myself feeling really, really awful while like getting ready, I usually just stay home. I'll do something else. I'll do my homework that I missed that day. It's a really, really hard feeling to describe for me, but it makes it so that it feels like what I'm about to do is going to be impossible, and it discourages me.
Jordan, I think I would have to agree with you in terms of kind of like feeling that trapped, or
yeah, something changes and then like I'm no longer comfortable, and then I'm like, okay, I need to like find a place where I can like calm down and like just get out of there.
All right, welcome back, guys. Welcome to... Wait, hold on. Fucking pause. See, everybody always reacts differently when I do that. It's so funny. Some people go...
Jordan.
Are you sure it's Jordan?
I'm Kenzie.
Are you depressed?
Who are you? So...
Asians? Okay.
like... Snail.
Oh, God. No, never. Jordan, what is your favorite color? No,
I got another question. Oh, that was